Okay, everybody, it is time for Friday the 13th, part 2, or what I lovingly refer to it as Potato Sack Jason. There is still no hockey mask during this one. It is indeed a burlap sack. This came out the year following the first one, since the first one was such a big hit. Got a sequel, and they found a way to make Jason the actual killer, saying that he was actually alive and he witnessed his mom get her head chopped off. And then he started killing people. Makes total sense. The runtime of this movie is only 87 minutes, and almost the first 6 minutes of it is flashback scenes from the end of the first movie. It starts out with Adrienne King playing Alice. She is not in the movie that long. She is just in the beginning long enough to have Jason find her and get rid of her. And then after that, they have like 4 minutes of credit scenes, all done with a black background, further eating up the runtime of this movie. So they didn't really have to focus on new things for this movie for almost 10 to 12 minutes of the movie. Even though this movie came out a year later, it is set 5 years after the events of the first movie. The camp, they don't go to Crystal Lake. They go to a camp right next to Crystal Lake because nobody is allowed in Crystal Lake. And of course, you have a new set of camp counselors and the person trying to start the camp that kind of dismiss what happened 5 years earlier. They, in fact, act like it happened so long ago, not just 5 years earlier in this movie. But they even talk about Jason and the legend of what happened. And then the Alice disappeared a few months later after the events of what happened at Camp Crystal Lake. And they all act like it's not a big deal. Betsy Palmer is in this a little bit as well as Mrs. Voorhees again, but mainly in flashback scenes and some other scenes that happen in the movie. We have a new final girl. We have Amy Steele playing Jenny, and she will be with us for a while. We also have John Furey, or Furey, I don't know how to say his last name, playing the character of Paul. And there's a kind of bit of a controversy of, did Paul survive or did he not survive? But basically the same cast of characters, but different people than last time. They're all serving the same sort of purpose in the first movie. Young, hot camp counselors come to set up camp for the summer, and they all don't take warnings seriously and get killed up until, the final scenes where whomever is left beats Jason. But he will come back for several more movies. And this movie was not filmed at the same location. It is not filmed in New Jersey. It is actually filmed on location in Connecticut. The first movie is the only movie filmed in New Jersey at the original camp, even though it looks exactly the same. I'm sure somehow they could have used it. Maybe after the movie came out, the Boy Scouts didn't want to give them permission anymore to use that location, although now they embrace it. I don't know how they felt in the 80s and 90s about that being used for Friday the 13th. So you're just looking for the particular ways that Jason comes upon and kills these camp counselors. You can tell the gore is toned down in this movie, and the kills are kind of cut away from. Instead of going for the shot, it is the transition from the kill to the next scene basically looks like they cut it short for the purpose of getting a non-X rating and being able to release this in movie theaters. You can tell the budget is bigger in this movie also, although by no means a high budget movie, but you can tell that they had more money to film this movie, if you know what I mean. It looks a little bit better, a little bit smoother, a little bit better cameras were used. The estimated budget of this movie was $1.25 million, and it was still a success, although not the runaway success of the first movie. It still almost made $22 million at the box office, which kept those sequels rolling. Also about number 2, notably because of number 1, there are no people in this one who end up being big stars in the future. No Kevin Bacon emerges from this cast. They work a little bit and then kind of never heard from again. But it is still your typical 80s slasher film that came in the aftermath of the Halloween movie. And I'm kind of torn about this one. It's not a bad movie in terms of slasher films. It's kind of just a rehash of the first one. There's some good scenes in it. I think the best scenes in this movie are actually from the Adrienne King scenes in the beginning of the movie. They are more suspenseful, not your basic kill. It's the more stalking and finding and getting back at the person who got away. And the very beginning of the movie is marred by the fact that they're clearly doing stuff to extend the runtime of this movie. This is the only movie in which Jason is played by a woman, the actual Jason. I'm not talking about his mom. In the beginning scenes of the movie, you'll see Jason walk along a puddle. Scenes leading up to him stalking Alice are all a woman playing Jason. Actually, 3 different people played Jason in this movie. You still don't have the iconic hockey mask. There's a lot less suspense in this movie except those beginning scenes because it is the same story as the first one. So I'm not saying the second one is not worth a watch. Hey, if you're watching all of the Jason movies, you gotta watch number 2, but don't expect anything groundbreaking. It is the same movie as the first one with a slightly higher budget, a better production value, but no real innovation of what happens in the movie. The kills are less innovative in this movie just because of the MPAA got so much slack for letting a lot of the things that happened in the first one go. I'd say it's worth a watch, but is it as good as the first one? Absolutely not. I mean, you do have the same score. Like I said, the score in these Jason movies is iconic. It's one of those scores that you hear and you know what it goes to. This one is directed by Stephen Miner, who goes on to direct the third one, and this is his first film he directs as well. And he was an uncredited second unit director on the first one, so he worked with Sean S. Cunningham. He also worked with directors like Wes Craven, so he knew a thing or two about horror at this point. I hope that makes sense to you. I know technically there are a lot of differences in this one and the first one, but basically a lot of the storyline is the same. And the kills aren't creative. I don't think the cast is engaging. I just like the first one a lot better than this one. And going off the cast not being as engaging, I find them stupider than the first cast, if that's the correct way to put it. I mean, a lot of these people, if they would have just looked around and been more observant of their surroundings, they would have saw Jason everywhere. Everywhere. But no, they didn't. And they got killed. Anyway, I guess this has been my basic little rant about the second Friday the 13th movie. Thank you for joining me. My name is Stacia. If you enjoyed this, think about subscribing to the channel. Think about helping me get more subscribers. I like when you guys comment as well. I like discussing film, and that's why I do this. I love you all out there. I'll see you guys next time for the next Friday the 13th movie.